And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the founder of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and it's great to be with you here on this Wednesday morning. Um, I told you, but I went to swap meet last weekend. Well, there's another swap meet coming up this weekend. Yeah, and so I'll be going. My wife says, "Why do you just enjoy going and looking at all those rusty old parts?" Well, because I buy those rusty old parts and I sell them and I make some money. At least that's the idea. Doesn't always work out like that way, like you'd like for it to. But hey, it's fun, and I do occasionally make a buck or two. So yeah, it's fun. Okay, so we're in Isaiah chapter 65. We have we have set the tone, I hope, sufficiently to show that the New Testament writers draw on Isaiah 64 through 66 in their prediction of the new creation. Now, don't forget, folks, the basis of this entire discussion of the new creation is the concept of Shemeni Atzerat, the eighth day, which in Israel's typological feast days signified a new beginning. That's the foundation of this. All right? So yesterday I pointed out for you how Isaiah 65 undoubtedly predicted a new creation. We'll be talking about that this morning, but if we have time. But we definitely have to talk about the dark lining to the silver cloud that was coming. And that dark lining was that before that new creation could come, the old creation had to pass away. I mean, isn't that what Isaiah 65:66 teaches, as we shall see? Is that not what 2 Peter 3 describes? The earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. Nevertheless, according to his promise, we look for a new heaven and new earth wherein dwells righteousness. Destruction of the old, coming into the new. Revelation 21. Destruction of the old heaven and old earth, Revelation 20, verses 11 through 12. And the coming of the new heaven and new earth, Revelation 21, 1 to 3. So, and it's interesting to me, Thomas Ice has said, well, the problem with preterism, it is always focused on the judgment of Israel. But he said, that's where preterists are wrong. The day of the Lord is not the time of the judgment of Israel. It's the time of the salvation of Israel. Well, where Thomas Ice is wrong, and by the way, many other commentators, is failing to see that scripturally, judgment and salvation are synchronous events. You don't have salvation and then 1,000 years later, destruction, or vice versa. You just don't have that concept. And you have the proper concept right here in Isaiah chapter 65. Okay, now watch this. The Lord says, thus says the Lord, as the new one is found in the cluster, and one says, do not destroy it all, because a blessing is to be found in it. Oh, wait a minute. Before we can get to the rest of this, we have to pay attention to this. You knew that would happen. What is the Lord talking about here? He's talking about the salvation of the remnant. Now, this is so important. One of Paul's very favorite doctrines that is foundational to his gospel is the salvation of the remnant. And I can already hear some people saying, well, Don, over in Romans chapter 11, Paul says all Israel shall be saved. Well, I don't have time this morning to give a long dissertation on Romans 9 through 11. But let's be very clear. In Romans 9 through 11, Paul is focused on the salvation of the remnant. He quotes from Isaiah chapter 10. He quotes from Hosea about the salvation, the end time salvation of the remnant. Now, would it not be really, really, really weird and disjunctive if in Romans 9 and in Romans 10, Romans chapter 10, has God cast off his people whom he foreknew? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite. I am of the tribe of Benjamin. And according as it is written, a remnant shall be saved. So if Paul is talking about the salvation of the remnant in Romans 9 and in Romans 10, and he carries through with it into chapter 11, would it not be totally disjunctive if we came to Romans chapter 11, 26 and 27, and all of a sudden Paul scraps everything that he had just said about the salvation of the remnant and says, oh, never mind, it's not going to be a remnant, it's going to be everybody. No, I'm sorry. That would make Paul contradict Paul, and that's not true. So, that doctrine of the salvation of the remnant is found right here in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 8. As a lead-in to the prophecy of the coming of the destruction of Israel, and as a lead-in to the prediction of the new creation. Are you tracking with me here? Do you see this? Isaiah's discussion and Isaiah's prediction was, first of all, the destruction of old covenant rebellious Israel. And flowing out of that destruction would be the salvation of the remnant, with whom, in whom, guess what God would do? He would take that remnant and join it with those who had never called on the name of the Lord. And he would take of those two people, the righteous remnant of Old Covenant Israel, joined with the Gentiles who had never known the Lord, never called on his name. And he would make, as Paul expressed it in Ephesians chapter 2, one new man. Oh my, what a profound and profoundly important concept and doctrine this is. So compare that then with the idea that we are told by the dispensationalist, we are told by the postmillennialist, we are told by the reformed amillennialist that at some future point of time in our future, all Israel shall be saved. Now, what they mean by that, they do not mean every single individual Jew, but they mean rather that the great majority. This is Kenneth Gentry's view, postmillennialist. This is Dwight Pentecost's view, dispensationalist. This is Middleton's view, amillennialist. I think it's Richard, isn't it? Richard Middleton. Point of fact is, in the three futurist views, ladies and gentlemen, they are positing the conversion at some future point of time. At some future point of time, they're positing the conversion and salvation of the majority of Israel. The majority. Well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the majority is not a remnant. A remnant is, as Paul quotes from Isaiah chapter 10, 22 and 23, except the Lord of Sabaoth had left us a remnant, though the children of Israel had been as the stars in the sky, if the Lord had not left us a remnant, we would have perished. And Paul's applying that to Israel of his day. Oh, by the way, I've got to mention this. I'm going to run out of time this morning, but this is really, really, really critical. And I don't see, the only commentator I've found so far that touches on this is N.T. Wright. I'm sure there are others out there that I just simply haven't found yet. But here's what I want you to see. The very doctrine of the salvation of the remnant demands the passing of the body, the passing of the majority. And you're going, okay, that's kind of what you just said. Yes, but maybe you didn't get the point. And the point of this is this: a remnant would only be saved at the time of the judgment of the body, the majority. Now look, Paul, Peter, the New Testament writers all saw that the remnant was being gathered in. Paul said, Romans chapter 11, verse 7, Israel has not attained that for which he sought, but the elect, that's the remnant, has attained it, and the rest were blinded. You see this majority versus minority? Do you see the majority versus remnant doctrine at work here? And it was something that was ongoing when Paul wrote. But guess what? It was to be consummated shortly and soon. Now I've got to go over here, and I don't have my Greek in front of me, but that's okay. I know what it says. In Romans chapter 9, after talking about the salvation of the remnant, and I'm going to begin back here in verse 26, Romans chapter 9. It shall come to pass that in that place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they shall be called the children of the living God. Paul is calling on the doctrine of the salvation of the remnant that was foretold in Hosea chapter 2. But the nation, you got to catch this. In Hosea, the corporate body of Israel was going to be destroyed. Amos chapter 5, the virgin daughter of Israel is fallen and will not rise again. Now watch what he then does. The city that went out 1,000 will return 100. The city that was 100 shall return 10. Now Amos and Hosea are parallel synchronous books. Pardon me. So here is Hosea, predicting and saying those who had been cut off and called not my people, a remnant of them would be saved. That's what Paul's drawing on in Romans chapter 9. But watch this. Isaiah also cries concerning Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. Now, what was the context of the salvation of the remnant? In Hosea and Isaiah, it was the impending destruction of the 10 northern tribes at the hands of the Assyrians. The Assyrians destroyed the body, only a remnant was saved. And here is Paul, writing only a few years before the destruction of Jerusalem and the nation in AD 70, saying, a remnant is being saved, a remnant is being called, but only a remnant will be saved. And then here's what he says. For he, that's Yahweh, will finish the work. What's the work? The salvation of the remnant. He will cut it short in righteousness, because a short work will the Lord make upon the earth. What's the work? Salvation of the remnant. He will cut it short, from the Greek word sumtimnon. Tough word for me to say for some reason. He will cut it short. Sumtilon. There is no doubt whatsoever linguistically that Paul is saying that the process that had already begun, the salvation of the remnant, would not be a long, drawn-out, protracted process. And it would be consummated at the coming of the Lord out of Zion. Well, that means that the coming out of the Lord out of Zion for the salvation of, quote, all Israel, was the coming of the Lord out of Zion to consummate the salvation of the remnant. And Romans 9:28 says that salvation that would come at the day of the Lord would happen shortly. A short work, the salvation of the remnant. The Lord will make a short work in righteousness. The salvation of the remnant at the day of the Lord to bring in the new creation. Once again, would not be a long, protracted, extended work. It was something that began in the first century and was to be done shortly, not over 2,000 years. That means, ladies and gentlemen, that the coming of the Lord to bring in the new creation at the time of the salvation of the remnant, since that salvation of the remnant had begun and would not be a long process, it would be done and consummated at the day of the Lord. That means the day of the Lord to bring in the new creation was coming shortly when Paul wrote Romans. I am completely out of time. Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. Be sure to join Mike Sullivan and me this evening on Preterist Apologetics as we continue our really, really rewarding study of how the Song of Moses impacts New Testament eschatology. Okay? And then be sure to join me on Friday as I continue my study. What about this guy, the man of sin? Okay? What about this guy? You don't want to miss any of this. So I'll see you there.